Olá, pessoal do Relampeio, essa é a última mesa do último dia do Relampeio, então já estamos terminando. Alguém bota aqui, editor, bota aqui a carinha do Chico Buarque feliz triste, porque a gente tá só o pó da rabiola, mas vai dar tudo certo. Bom, então eu sou a Jana Bianchi, eu sou autora, editora da Mafagafo, co-hosts no Curta Ficção, eu sou tradutora, eu sou dona da Paçoca da Pipoca, projeteira maluca, passeadora de lobisomens, acho que vocês me conhecem. E antes de eu apresentar as outras pessoas que vão entrar aqui no bate-papo com a gente, eu queria primeiro agradecer a todo mundo que está participando do Relampeio, está sendo muito legal, a gente está muito feliz com todo mundo que está participando, que está comentando no chat. Podem comentar aí, que nós temos a produção, sempre está respondendo aí. E eu quero falar um pouco também do projeto que a gente está apoiando hoje. Quem participou das outras mesas, quem viu, sabe que a gente está apoiando alguns projetos de cunho social, por conta, assim, a gente tem o privilégio de estar aqui, de estar conversando, de estar celebrando a arte, a literatura, que é uma coisa que a gente sabe que as pessoas, não é todo mundo que tem, especialmente aqui, especialmente nessa situação muito complicada. Então, hoje o projeto que a gente está apoiando é o projeto Rio Negro Nós Cuidamos. É um projeto que é encabeçado por mulheres indígenas da Amazônia. Elas já ajudaram várias famílias e estão há bastante tempo fazendo o projeto. A gente vai deixar os links, tem no nosso site, né? Nosso site, para quem não sabe, é relampeio.com.br, não poderia ser mais fácil. Lá tem todos os links para fazer a doação, tem todo o jeito de doar, tudo certinho lá. Então, assim, se vocês acham que o festival está sendo legal, todo mundo que está participando aqui está participando de maneira totalmente voluntária. Então, nem os convidados de fora, nem os nossos mediadores, que são maravilhosos, que trabalham com isso, nem os tradutores que estão aí fazendo um trabalho duríssimo, estão recebendo por isso. Então, se você puder, dá uma passadinha no projeto e deixa um apoio substancial, né, de alguma coisa palpável, que vai ser muito legal. Falando em tradutores, nós estamos com 2 tradutores aqui. Então, para quem não acompanhar em inglês, a entrevista vai se dar aqui em inglês. Quem não acompanhar não tem problema. Primeiro porque tanto o Renan, Bernardo, quanto a Deborah Happ, que são os tradutores de hoje, vão estar traduzindo real time aí para vocês, mas também todas as mesas vão ser legendadas depois, então todo mundo vai poder assistir sem problema nenhum, vai ser muito legal. Então vamos lá, vou apresentar as pessoas que estão aqui com a gente. A nossa primeira convidada super especial é a minha chefa, uma das minhas chefas aqui, a Ana Martino. A Ana, para quem não conhece, ela é uma das editoras fundadoras da Dame Blanche. Na verdade, o principal fundador ali é o Renan, mas né, tudo bem, a Ana divide ali esse posto. A Ana é escritora, eu vou até aqui ler, ela já publicou 4 livros, tá certo essa contagem?
Tá certo, até
atual.
Aqui.
Então, beleza. E ela escreve ficção especulativa, ela teve também um trabalho interpretado na rádio BBC World, e ela já publicou em revistas como Atraso, a Mafagafo, a Taverna e Mitografias. O trabalho mais recente dela é o Senhor Tempo Bom, que saiu pela Plutão. Um beijo, Plutão, um beijo, André. Ela também publica uma newsletter sobre escrita maravilhosa, recomendo muito, que chama Ana Dixit, e participa do podcast literário Pergunte às Damas. Você pode encontrar a Ana no @AnaDixit com X, ou então no site dessa mulher, que é anamartino com 2Ns.com. O Ana é com 2 Ns, não o Martino. Além disso, a Ana costura as próprias roupas. Não sei se essa roupa aí foi você que costurou.
Feita especialmente para a ocasião, né?
Então, assim, encomendas, vocês mandem um inbox para a Ana. E a gente também vai conversar com o Jin. O Jin Anotsu, ele é escritor, tradutor, roteirista de cinema e estudante de coisas aleatórias. Seus livros foram publicados em 13 países, tá certo essa contagem? Tem que perguntar, porque o negócio é muito...
Acho, sim, até agora sim.
Maravilhoso.
Agora, sim.
E ele gosta de moda e emo rap nas horas vagas. Ele também é uma das minhas referências particulares na hora de escrever fantasia urbana ambientada no Brasil. Eu amo tanto o trabalho da Ana quanto do Jin, são pessoas preferidas da minha vida. E o Jin também é estudante de moda, então assim, a gente tá num painel de pessoas muito bem vestidas. Eu não posso falar pelo Neil, mas eu não me encaixo muito nessa categoria, mas tudo bem. E essa mesa poderia ser sobre moda, mas não é. Essa mesa é sobre, a gente vai falar sobre a função do editor, né? A gente vai falar sobre editar, sobre publicar, sobre fazer curadoria de material. E para isso, a gente não poderia ter a pessoa melhor que o Neil Clarke. Quem não conhece o Neil Clarke, ele é editor da revista Clarkesworld, que é uma das revistas mais prestigiosas lá do mercado anglófono. A revista já venceu os prêmios Hugo e World Fantasy, e também ele é editor de várias antologias, incluindo a Best Science Fiction of the Year, que sai todos os anos, como diz o nome. Ele foi finalista do Prêmio Hugo 8 vezes na categoria de melhor editora, como de narrativas curtas, ganhou o Prêmio Chesley de melhor diretor de arte 3 vezes e recebeu o Prêmio Solstice da SFWA em 2019. Ele vive em New Jersey, nos Estados Unidos, com a esposa e os 2 filhos. E eu sou meio bairrista, então vou fazer um comentário que eu adicionei aqui. Para quem não sabe, a Clarkesworld, ela já publicou 2 contos, já ou só, não sei, vamos julgar ao longo da mesa, 2 contos escritos por pessoas do Brasil, um do Jacques Barcia, que é de Recife, ele escreveu um conto que se chama Salvaging Gods, foi publicado em 2010, e a Ashi Poeio Beijo, acho que também saiu na Mafagafo, que é de Porto Alegre, publicou What the South Wind Whispers em 2018. E, coincidentemente, a capa de junho deste ano, de 2020, o mês corrente, para quem está assistindo presente, esperamos que tenha futuro para você assistir, como bem disse a Fer, é também de um brasileiro, que é o Vico Menezes, que é de Santa Maria. So, I will switch to English now. I swear, Neil, that I didn't say anything bad about you. I just praised you, okay?
Okay.
And praise everybody, because I'm very happy. So, thanks a lot for coming to Relampeio. We are very happy to have such a strong voice in the Anglophone market to talk to us. And I will just start give you all the voice to talk. And let's start with the questions that both Anna and Jim already sent to you. And then later, if you have some time, we can pick some questions from the chat and then ask you to answer to us. So Anna, if you can ask the first question, please.
Okay, off we go then. I reckon that the first part of the conversation is how we deal with different cultures, not only country cultures, but writing culture as well. So I guess the main question is, what should a writer and an editor for 2 different cultures keep in mind when working together, to keep so many literary traditions can be maintained? Or, in other words, how could they together mitigate the inevitable communication noises, so not to lose much of the main message when editing the text? Mm-hmm. For example, how do we as Brazilians who speak too much with our hands and have exaggerated everything, colors, sounds, everything, can work together with the Anglophonic mentality of, okay, show, don't tell, etc., etc. How do we keep this communication going?
I think that when I'm working with an author, it doesn't matter where they're from. Everybody's got something a little different in their, in their writing style, in their own culture or whatever. So I think that the primary thing is to be respectful and have the open communication. And if an author doesn't, I tend to ask a lot of questions. Some editors might say, do this, do this, do this. An author has to be willing to push back. It's their baby. Ultimately, they have to be happy with whatever an editor is suggesting. And to add to the mix on some situations, you have a translator involved. So now you're dealing with 3 different people trying to convey the original meaning or the spirit of the story in the original language in another one, and that adds another layer of complexity as well. So it helps to have everybody willing to talk and to push back when you think that something's going the wrong way.
Always works best. One small caveat in there.
Yeah.
Do you get lots of work with translators as of lately in Clarkesworld, or how does that work for you?
So I've done a lot of work with translators over the years. We've published a lot of works in translation. We've been fortunate enough to have a relationship with a company in China to help us pay for translation of their stories. We had a grant from South Korea last year to translate some there. So I'm pursuing other grant opportunities in different countries to see if we can find ways to broaden that a bit. But we do get a lot of stories in translation that come into us already translated in our submissions pile.
Let's
And-
talk about that, Neil.
Okay, we can talk about that. But I think that one of the things you have to watch in translation, in order to convey that spirit of the story, sometimes you're dealing with local knowledge. So imagine trying to translate an alternate history. For that's a history that might not be taught in the country that the editor is in, or that maybe a certain percentage of the readers are in. There are ways around that. You can, put footnotes, or I don't really care much for footnoting too much, because I think it's a little distracting. But for an alternate history, as an example of one that we've done, we actually added an extra paragraph or two to the start of the story to set the stage, which we would do if we were doing a story about anywhere else. I mean, we're in science fiction. We write stories about alien worlds. It should be possible to make people understand what we mean when we're talking about something that's actually taking place on our own. And it's one of those things that's always puzzled me in American science fiction, is that we're quite happy to talk about alien worlds, but show us a story from the other side of the world and we freak out.
We talked about that in a couple of other panels, the events, and just a comment. I work as a translator. Anna and Jim also translate pieces of things here and there, and this is very curious because this is something that's very natural for us to have this concern, right? Because we are we have a lot of contact with the US culture, with the Anglophone world culture, more than you have with the Brazilian or other countries' culture, and of course, but at the same time, there's some things that are like beyond what our readers are able to catch when they are reading something. So this is very curious, because this is something that's a concern to us, that because we are in a world that it is a world that consumes translated work. Maybe I don't want to say if it's more or less than inside like home fiction, but more than you are like a country that most
spreads information out instead of getting information in.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, that's a problem.
Yeah. So
Now,
Jim,
something-
Jana, comment if you want to comment.
No, just mention. Jim, you go on. You go on.
Yeah, okay. I was just there was a part that got really interesting for me, in which he said about the author like playing ball with the editor, and it's quite interesting because just last week I was reading a biography of an editor, the one about Max Perkins. He was the guy who edited Fitzgerald and Hemingway, and there are two quotes by Perkins that stuck with me, which was, "The book belongs to the author, the story, and also the editor is extremely fallible, and you shouldn't trust the editor, but you gotta put your life in his hand." So how do you achieve this balance, especially when you're dealing with translated works and works that come from different contexts, different cultures, and you also have to edit this and play ball with the author, so I think there's a clash in there. And talking about footnotes, just an addendum, my favorite author is David Foster Wallace, so it's sort of I love footnotes.
The Wallace footnotes have footnotes. It's ridiculous.
Yes, that's what I love about it,
I think that the reason I sort of push back on footnotes is that some people use them way too much. Like, I remember editing one story where they footnoted a phrase, and I went and looked at the footnote, and it said term of affection. And in context, it was very clear it was a term of affection. You don't need to footnote things that you can convey through the setting or context in the story. I think trying to find that balance. It's different each time. Sometimes I've ended up in like long email conversations that have nothing to do with the story, that are sort of giving me some background onto where this story came from. And that's very valuable in many cases to understand. I mentioned this, the idea of the spirit of the story, so that, you're never going to do 100% literal translation of a story. You're always going to move it a little bit so that it still conveys what that a reader in its original language would feel, and what a reader in its second language would feel. And sometimes you have to change some words to do that. Common instances like puns that they just don't translate. You have to substitute.
I know very well.
The problems of translating PG Woodhouse in Portuguese.
Yes. Oh.
1/3 of a story doesn't make any sense for the Brazilians because the ambient is different, and 2/3 of it is puns that get lost. Douglas Adams, same thing. Half of the fun is gone in the translation because the puns only work in English.
Yes, there's also Molesworth, which is about a schoolboy in England, which I think like J.K. Rowling sort of stole a lot of things from it. And it's so full of puns that I don't imagine how it could be translated. And if it were translated, the editor and the translators would have to sell their soul for it.
Well, you don't have to think much about it if you think that every single new edition of Alice in Wonderland takes about 10 years to be done, because how do you translate every single verse? It's impossible. It becomes a work in it. It's like a Terry Gilliam movie. Just keeps adding and adding and adding, and you don't finish it. So it had to be a bit reduced for 5 to 10K in Clarkesworld, I imagine. It's not Lewis Carroll, but it's just complicated.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the times, if we're commissioning a translation, which happens sometimes, well, I tend to pick translators who are actually science fiction writers already, because there's another bit of the translation that has to happen. They need to understand how to write in science fiction in English. There's little things like the terminology, they won't know certain things. So we have to be, it's all part about, having the proper team working on a story. And when you have that, it goes much more smoothly. I have had instances where we did not, and it was a very rough process. And you learn from those, and you try not to make the same mistakes twice.
Yeah. In this point, the science fiction or fantasy or whatever is kind of it's like it was a technical translation, right? The same way you have a doctor to translate doctor stuff, you have you should have the same. So Jim, maybe if you can go to your question, your first question.
Yes. So it's pretty simple. I was asking myself, how do you see this exchange of stories from one country to another in the next few years? Is it here to stay, or is it just a fad? Here in Brazil, we're using to read a lot of novels in English and consume a lot of English-speaking culture, music and rock and rap and etc. But it has been a very one-way conversation for a long time. For example, here I get to read John Crowley, Thomas Ligotti, and Mervyn Peck, but few English speakers know Guimarães Rosa, for example. Recently, the translation of Brás Cubas by Machado de Assis became a bestseller in the US. Does it work as an example of a change in this relationship, in this tide, or is it just a blip? Do you expect a change, more openness to other countries and cultures? Since, for example, in your magazine, you published Jacques, a dear friend of mine, who wrote a beautiful story. And what comes next?
Well, this is one of those cases where, having been a little bit warned or given some information about what you would be asking about, I had some time to prepare. And this is a magazine from 1968. Okay, it was edited by Frederick Pohl. It's called International Science Fiction. It lasted for 2 issues. That's how long but in its second issue, there's something that I love to quote because I think it demonstrates how long this problem has been going on. It's an editorial by Lester Del Rey, who was one of the major editors in the field. And like I said, it was edited by Frederick Pohl, another major name in science fiction back then. It says, every other language has a large educated class who can read and translate English, but those who learn English first seldom bother to master any other language. As a result, our stories are sent to a large number of fans and translators all over the world, while our own authors and fans seldom get even a hint of the work being done in our field by others. We're in serious danger of becoming the most provincial science fiction readers and writers on Earth. And that's 1968, and that's what happened. We became the most provincial science fiction fantasy readers on Earth. In the last, maybe, if I'm being generous, 7 years, but probably more like 5 or 6, there's been a little bit of an opening up to the possibility of science fiction from other countries and other languages. Translation always developed something of a bad rap because there were so many bad translations early on. Projects like this were common attempts to bring in other international works. There was a lot of anthologies done, but they all made the same mistake. They all put their eggs in one basket. They were works that were just international fiction, just works in translation, just works from a certain country. They were preaching to the choir. They weren't converting new fans because the older fans that had decided that there was nothing good coming from anywhere else would look at it and go, "Oh, international? No thanks." So when we started doing this, one of our thoughts was, we're not going to do special issues. We're not going to do a theme or anything like that. We're going to take advantage of what short fiction can do best. Every editor knows, every short fiction editor knows that there are stories you absolutely love that your readers, you're not sure. You think that so you sandwich that story in amongst other ones that are going to be more easier for them to swallow. Our idea was to treat the stories like any other, a translated work or a work from an international audience. Just treat it like it's normal. It's a story coming in. It doesn't matter if it's from New Jersey or Ireland or Brazil or China or Russia or whatever. It's a story. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that presently, a magazine like Clarkesworld traditionally would be called an American magazine because that's where you would be able to get it. Back when everything was being done in print, it wasn't common to see it outside the US. You might find a few copies here and there. But for online and digital publishing, our audience is the world. And, we're doing a bad job at representing our audience if we're not including the world in the table of contents. So I think that's sort of what's been driving us. The other nice thing is that I'm a believer that short fiction is sort of the testing ground of science fiction in the US. You'll see a lot of authors come up through short fiction and go into novels. It's not the only path into novels, but it's a common path, and new things, new styles of writing or whatever get tested there first. And so I think that us demonstrating that there's quality work outside the box that's typically been put around us has helped. And I know editors at some of the larger publishing houses do read short fiction, so they are aware of what's going on. There's more people talking about it than there was even a few years ago. There's some great resources now dedicated to where to find international works or translated works. So I think things are changing. Unfortunately, I also think it's happening very slowly. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's just I wanted to make a comment that I thought must be maybe funny. You say that sometimes readers see international. No, I don't want it. And we are now changing that. But not many years ago, we would have the same problem with Brazilian fiction to Brazilians. So people would say, Brazilian author? No, thank you.
Thanks.
I would just read what I have from the US, from the Europe. So there's people that had, that publish using pen names that like sound like American, sound like not Brazilian, because we had the same problem that I think it's kind of imported problem, right? Because we also had a lot of fiction coming from abroad and coming.
That's what the locals call the underdog syndrome. Síndrome do vira-lata, which means that if it's local, it can't be good. And that's the eternal fight that we have. So we have a two-tire fight.
And we have the opposite, where we had a long period of time where people felt that if it wasn't local, it wasn't good. And I think that there's a big problem. There's one other effect that I've described to people is sort of a pedestal effect. And that's something I came up with after talking with a lot of people in different countries where almost all of the translated science fiction in their country, or a significant percentage of what is published in science fiction, was coming from the United States.
The ABC problem.
Yeah, so it's this perception that the United States is the king of the hill in science fiction, and you can include in sort of that orbit the UK, Canada, and Australia. But that's a problem, because we end up acting like an invasive species, choking out the local population. Now, sometimes it's actually good because there wasn't a local community, and it brings up awareness of what science fiction is and stuff. But after a while, there needs to be some balance. There should be more local science fiction published in a country than there is imported from other countries. And it's really damaging. But one of the side effects of what we've been doing in including more translated and international works is that we've sort of, I hate to say it, but validated those works. And I think that's a terrible thing to have to say. Those were great works. That's why we picked them. But for some reason, they weren't willing to translate them to other languages until they saw them in English. And that's, again, another major problem. But hopefully, as more of this becomes normal here, it filters out and they stop seeing, American market or whatever, they stop labeling fiction based on where it came from.
That's something quite, sorry to interrupt, something that is interesting for me is that it seems like people want this external validation. It seems like you're always searching for this abroad validation. And I have been published in different countries, and it seems like here in Brazil, people is always searching for this external validation. And if outside you get good things outside, then people here start looking at you differently. And I think that's a problem, because it seems we're always searching for something that is beyond and trying to adapt to these standards. And as an author here, when you're writing fantasy and sci-fi, you have this tendency to copy what is American and British or English language, and sometimes down your career you start looking inward towards your own country. And this perspective of trying to please outside, to write for outside people, kinds of kills the baby in the cradle, and I see it as a very problematic thing here.
Oh, yes. I would much rather, I tell authors to write what they want to write. Don't try and write what what they think I want, because they don't know and I don't know what I want.
You won't know until you see it.
Exactly.
I guess that leads to my other question, which I planned to say. It pretty much fits in the theme.
Yeah, I would say go ahead.
Go ahead. Because it is like, how do we avoid the exotism of the foreign story? This was something that had been discussed at Flights of Foundry last month, but not really deeply. What's the role of the publisher in this decolonization of the short story market? As you said, the idea that in the American SFF is a colonizing species killing the local fauna and flora. So is there a space for such discussion in the Anglophone market at present? And in more specific detail, how does Clarkesworld deal with the idea of trying to avoid foreign stories that are seen as exotic or coming from a hot country, for example? There was the idea of, that we have Nigerian authors. We have published one Nigerian author already, so we don't need more. Or we've already published Brazilians. We don't really need more Brazilians coming in, which in England they call the Lenny Henry problem, because we don't need another black actor. We already have Lenny Henry. So how do we avoid that sort of, oh no, he's the author from Brazil? No, there's a problem with that, but that's pretty much puts you in a exotic situation that we clearly do not want to see.
That sounds like they're almost publishing like a checklist. Got that one.
Yeah, it feels like for the authors as well. I mean, oh my God, what do I fit?
About. Yeah, that's not what any of this is about. Basically, you have to be willing to look at them as stories. That's it. It's once you start caring about where they came from, it becomes a problem. I'm paying attention because to where they're coming from, because there is a history of the United States is 4% of the global population, something like that, 4 or 5%, and a few years ago, it was about 75% of all submissions that we were receiving. And it has recently gone below 60 for the first time. I'm actively working to bring that number, like the number of international submissions up, because I want to see more. Good stories can come from anywhere. So if you're only seeing stories from one place, you're missing something. And I think some of that is just a mindset that has happened here over the years. You have some people complain about foreign fiction being too difficult, and it's like, it's not difficult. Come on, you can like I said before, you can read a story about an alien world and you don't care, but other side of the world, forget it. It's like, no, that's not how this game works. There are a number of readers who just want comfort food. They want what they're used to. They want the same stories they read when they were a kid. So there's a sort of a retro sci-fi movement of people who really want just good old-fashioned science fiction. Then there's a lot of people who look at science fiction as constantly moving forward. And to keep moving forward, we need to have all the voices in the mix. So the moment you start focusing on one and saying, "Oh well, yeah, we're gonna only do this because you said a hot country," it just means that somebody got published from there. It would be like saying New Jersey is a hot state for science fiction because we had one author get published, from New Jersey. That's not how it works. Like, countries don't have monopolies on ideas or writing talent. So I think the some of what you see in that is people are marketing, and they're marketing the wrong way. They're marketing some aspect of the author rather than the story itself.
This about sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's just you're talking about like comfort food. Junot Diaz, the author of Oscar Wilde, he said a quote that is like, sorry for the bad word now, motherfuckers will read a book that's 1/3 Elvish, but put 2 sentences in Spanish and they think we're taking over. And I love this quote by Junot Diaz, is that you read about fantasy worlds and Middle-earth and Valhalla, but if you put like a little word and like another language, they seem you're like raiding their country and you're making, some puppy sad.
Yeah.
It's the usual complaint you have from Russian novels, isn't it? Yes. I mean, you can read Tolkien back to front, all these complicated names, and they put a Russian novel with name, patronymic, surname, and they go, can't read that. So
I think there's no light here. It
apparently,
got dark.
No.
I will
have You're the mysterious writer.
It
You're the
would be
mysterious
good.
writer.
Yes.
It would be good. Just go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that I do believe things are changing. They're just moving more slowly than I'd like to see. But I think the whole idea of approaching things as exotic is what has failed in the past, and hopefully they'll look back at the history of what's happened and go, yeah, marketing that way it's not effective. So we have to move beyond that.
Before going to the next question of Jim, that I think there's a lot to do with that. I just want to make one point. I am seeing the questions. I don't think anybody talked about that so far. So I just want to say about that is that there's something like we don't look who is writing the story, but at the same time, we are kind of starting. We as non-English speaker writers, we are kind of starting from a lower, step, because here to translate something from Portuguese to English, it's really, really expensive. Translating is a very slow process, and from English, or you will be hiring this service from somebody from abroad that's today dollar is like, I don't know, we are not counting anymore. Okay, so just think about it. Okay, but and this is something that I don't know. I don't want to poke you, but recently Francesco Verso talked to you in Twitter, and we are not stalking you by
no,
any
not at all.
means.
No.
But I saw it, and he was saying that in either ideal world, you as editors from the US or from the Anglophone world should have slash readers or readers that could read other languages too. But we know that this is really expensive stuff and all of that. This is it's not a question or anything, it's just a point that it's something that needs to enter in the equation somehow. Yeah. So we are trying to do small things here. So as an example, I have a magazine that's called Mafagafo, and we have a special branch of it that just published flash fictions. Fernanda Castro is the editor, and we recently did poll of we asked people to vote in the stories they liked most, and the 5 stories that they liked most, we paid for a translator to translate it to English. So I hope they send it to you, because I put Clarkesworld in the list.
They've paid.
But it's really slow. It's really small, it's just one small, I don't know, thing that we're trying to do. I just wanted to.
No, I think one of he's right. We do need more. We need more active, proactive work within regions, and unfortunately, the economics of short fiction just don't. The money's just not there. I mean, most of my colleagues are paying their authors the minimum CIFA qualifying rate, and a good chunk of their staff isn't getting anything. So until that's solved and there's some, money within that system where they can actually pay people to do things, it won't change. And one of the things that we've run across is that translation often costs more per word than the CIFA qualifying rate for short fiction here. So it's more than double the expense to publish some of those stories. What we've started doing is, if a story comes to us pre-translated, we're going to pay the translator and the author our standard word rate, which is 10 cents a word. So because we think that both of them should be paid for their work. So we're putting our money where our mouth is on that. But that is not a common practice. I would say it's probably more common that they end up splitting the payment. And that's largely just due to the economics of the situation.
Yeah. So Jim,
one thing we can do more though is start talking with editors like yourself in those countries, which is why earlier I had asked, who should I be watching for? So these are the types of conversations that need to be happening more. And I'm not going to put you on the spot in the middle of YouTube. But all of you in the comments there can volunteer who she should be recommending.
Yeah, but I say that I would
names on the YouTube.
Yeah.
Later, folks. Names in the comments.
Yeah, I will start changing Anotsu. Martino.
Yeah. Since we're here already, but
You're
please
so
silly. And they can write
of course
in English.
We are silly, love.
I'm kidding.
Of course
so
we
Jim,
are silly.
Yeah. So Jim, go ahead to your second question. I think we already talked a little bit about that, but there's some stuff more.
Okay. We talked about it naturally, but let's go. Complementing Anna's question, what's the role of the publisher, the magazine, the publishing house on removing the responsibility of people of color or foreign authors of representing something or telling what the market wants from them, not what they want to write? Could people from other countries get to be read abroad without writing about the experience of being insert here? And could a Black, etc. author publish something the same way old white people do? And here I say, for example, my example, I write mostly now for middle grade. And I feel I want to write a middle grade just like, Rick Riordan can, without having to represent white kids, just writing a story. And sometimes it seems difficult because you expect Brazilians to write about the favelas, about the backlands, about something like this. And we lose the experience of just being people. And that's the thing I want to discuss.
No, and I think that it's really shameful when that happens. That people feel that they have to write or have to represent a group. We would never ask, like I said before, we wouldn't ask a New Jersey author to define the New Jersey experience, the New Jersey story or whatever. That's ridiculous. Every person in the state would probably write a very different story from one another. And no matter where you go in the world, that's going to be the exact same experience. So, I think there isn't a lot as editors that I think we can do to prevent readers or the community at large from doing that to somebody. But we can ourselves not do that and make the problem, feature the problem. And I think that's part of the reason why I never wanted to do, a special issue of translations or the theme issues or whatever, because I didn't want to have, it's like, oh, well, yeah, this is what Brazilian fiction is, or this is what Russian fiction is. No, it's not. These are just 5 or 8 people who write science fiction that happen to be from those countries, And I hope that they're writing the stories they want to write rather than the stories that they believe the world wants to see from them because of who they are. I think something is stolen when you make people do that, and it's a loss to the field. So I would much rather see what they've been inspired to write. Science fiction is pretty much standing on the shoulders of everyone that came before, every author that's ever influenced you or whatever. And I want you to tell your story, not theirs, not what somebody else thinks you should write. To me, those are the best ones, the ones that the author has been inspired by.
But even when we do that, here comes the second part, is how it is received. Because, like, for example, Ninette Okorafor, she wrote A Kata Wish, and people be like, oh, she is the Black Nigerian Harry Potter, and she fights a lot against it. Like, it's not Nigerian Harry Potter. It is what I write.
Yeah.
And some people come to me and tell, like, I have this book about scouts in a monster camp, and people say, oh, that's like a Black Scout in Hogwarts. And I said, no, it's not Black Scouts in Hogwarts. They are like this a different thing and different whatever. And I get, me specifically now, I get invited a lot to a lot of panels and etc. And it's always like, Jim, right? Would you like to talk about being a Black author and writing fantasy, etc.? It's always that.
I get that on women's panel. I get that all the time. It's like, can you tell me what it's like to be a woman at editing fantasy? Mate, I can talk about so many things, but the fact that I'm a woman shouldn't really be part of the process.
Yeah. So it kills me.
It kills me. And it's the worst part is, although I get the point that good stories come from everywhere, one of the main problems that we have from talking from the outside, trying to barge in, is how do we make... It's not how we make the plate palatable for the American audience. It's how to convince them to eat it. It's not what you put in the plate. It's how, okay, read this. How
we need to make them. We need to make them like don't want to see. Like we send so many stories that okay, I will publish.
we have to forge forward, because otherwise it's going to be, oh, it's the Black Harry Potter. No, it isn't.
Yeah. They need to start firing people in the marketing departments that do that stuff. That's how you put an end to it. That's
how you do it. It's even the pitching process. We had Pete Med a couple of weeks ago, and if you read the pitching on Twitter, it was like something meets something else, and you go, oh, okay, I can see why you're doing it, but really,
it's more harmful than helpful.
Exactly. It's disheartening as well. It's a bit like, do we really have to fit in these boxes in order to be seen by the world?
Well, and
validation
I think
or no validation.
Try to put some light here.
That's also going to be a bit of a difference between the short fiction markets and the novel markets, is that they're going to take pitches, whereas short fiction, we just want to see the story. Don't describe it to us. Don't spoil it. We're going to read it.
Yeah, because you have only 5K. If you start speaking too much, you give the game away.
No, and I'll say that I know that I'm sort of an outlier in amongst my colleagues. That I published a lot more international science fiction than many of my colleagues do. There's no real reason for that, short of not being a little bit more proactive about it. Like I said, in order to get the percentage of international submissions up at Clarkesworld, I actually had to let people know that they were allowed to submit. For some reason, the number one question that I get from international authors, can I submit to your market, or is it only to Americans?
Yeah, that's what we get as well from coming from our point of view. When we approach the magazine and we read the table of contents, we're thinking, okay, what are you guys taking? And so I cannot totally understand why the question is, do you take international authors? Because sometimes the answer is no. For some,
none of them will say no straight out.
No, straight out, but they will put it in the underlines.
But they don't actually practice what they preach. So that's part of the problem. So, it's a chicken and the egg problem. Some of them will go, well, I don't get enough quality submissions, so it looks like I'm doing none. Well, you have to actually stand up and shout, hey, we want more. We're not getting them. So I will take this opportunity right now to say, to any author that's listening or watching this live or recorded later, we want to see your stories. Send them. Now, unfortunately, we have to see them in English. That's a major problem at this point. But we're hoping down the line to be able to do something a little bit more proactive, and you want to find ways to help support those efforts when you find them happening locally. Like your short fiction markets, you want them to do well so that you have a home in your country, and those markets can help lobby your work as well.
Support the local scene, guys.
Yeah.
Support the local scene.
It's important. And if you've got awards, celebrate those. Don't treat like the American awards or whatever as like the big ones. The big one in your country is the big one. That's the one you're competing for. And I know editors are watching different awards at different countries to see what's going on, and they'll recognize a name sometimes that comes up that way. But there's a lot more to be done here, and I know we're ahead of the curve, but we still have a lot more work to do as well.
We already exchanged a couple of tweets about that in the past, but you said something that when you start publishing, you publish a Brazilian author, then in the next couple of months you receive a lot of Brazilian material because they see, I can go there, I am welcome to do that.
To give it a chance.
So it's not just words, it's actions.
Yeah. So this is something that it's crazy, but it's sometimes just seeing a tweet saying that there's a couple of, as you say, it can be just words, but there's a couple of magazines they say that we ask for stories from people from different backgrounds, including different languages. I have 2 comments from the chat, and then if you don't have anything to add about this matter, I think we could go to the questions in the chat. Do you want to add something, Anna, Jim?
No, I'm cool. Jim?
No,
Jim?
I'm okay. I'm all good.
Jim sighed okay, I have a lot of things to say about that.
It's weird. I gotta control myself, because otherwise we're gonna be here until tomorrow, and I believe there's a little creature here at home who would be really sad with that.
Okay.
I would say let's go, but this is the priority.
Jim's got a baby, I got a kid, and who soon will be bedtime for him, so I have to keep an eye on it.
Okay, so the 2 comments were one is that lots of people in the chat say that we had along the festival, we noticed that we also don't consume things that are not from the Anglophone world and not from the Brazilian market. So we had 2 panels that were great. We cried, just to you to know, we really actually cried in the 2 panels, one of with Libia Brenda from Mexico, and Teresa from Argentina. And we were everybody were what were we doing in your lives that we didn't read anything from them so far? And most of people can't read in Spanish, so actually they both signed to publishing house during the festival, so they will be publishing here in Portuguese. This is great. And but also they all publish in English. As an example, they already published in the Anglophone market. So
we have a huge deficit in what comes to Spanish-speaking world, even though we are surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries everywhere.
Yes, that's so weird. But the problem is Brazil thinks that we are part of the Western world.
Yeah,
and they don't see themselves.
We have this tendency to imagine that we are eligible to Harold Bloom's canon, but we're not. We're not part of the Western canon of the Western society as understood.
One example I got from this, and it's a very ridiculous stuff. Penguin, of the British publisher, has just come out with a new collection of sci-fi books. Amazingly enough, not all of them by British or American writers. EUA. Among them, we have Trafalgar by Angelica Gorodisha, which is a story that is set in the wonderful and exotic Rosario in Argentina. Trafalgar is a creature. I can't tell you much of a story without giving it away. But Trafalgar is not human, and he's going around the cafes and the bars and the local scene in Rosario. Rosario is a city the size of a walnut in Argentina. And it's a penguin. And many people in Brazil will find out about Trafalgar because it's a penguin. Instead of bloody hell, the country is next door. You could have translated that. So we're having a problem as well. We're an island. We're an island. And we're not part of the Western canon. How wish we were? I don't know, but we don't.
You know, that's the bad part. You know, Harold Bloom put like one Brazilian there just to say, hey,
that's the guy.
Yeah, and that's a problem. That we should have more conversations with people around us, and even further, read people from even distant places. For example, I have just read a book by a Russian author of whatever he writes, Victor Pelevin, and it's so cool and it's so incredible, and we don't have much conversations with it. And even here, I was reading these days an Argentinian novel. It's not fantasy, and I was so touched by it. And we don't know our neighbors, and we know everything.
And the funny thing is, the opposite is not true.
Yeah.
I have lots of contact with Argentina. Travel there quite a lot. And if you want to see how a humbling experience is to go to a big library in Argentina and bookshop and ask Brazilian section, and they have row upon row of Brazilian books. Same thing with music, but mostly literature. They have translated quite a lot of stuff, and the opposite is not true. I mean, I'll ask you an Argentinian writer at the top of your head. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Cortázar. Mate, Cortázar. Or Borges. Mate. With all respect to Cortázar, who is like...
Don't haunt our life, please.
No, please. No, thank you very much. There is so much more to it. That's Trafalgar. I mean, Trafalgar is a wonderful character, a wonderful creature. And we didn't get him here. It got translated by bloody Penguin, and we get it translated in bloody Portuguese.
Yeah.
So we have to have this conversation as well. It's not only... we are trying to get into an English market. Sure, we're trying to get into the Spanish market as well. Latin American markets. We're supposed to try and get in.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Sorry, I just get hungry.
It's just in a practical example. I translate both from Spanish to Portuguese and from English to Portuguese, and I just translated like comic books from Argentina. They are great, but they are kind of a niche, you know. They are the Latin America comic. Because we also, I don't know why, or maybe if somebody knows, they can say that. But we consume a lot of European comic books, a lot of Latin America comic books, but not the same with the prose. You know, that's crazy. So let's go to the questions from the public, from the
Otherwise, we can't stay here all night.
Yeah.
There are lots
I'm
of
not
Someone
sure
who wants to come here, you can go on.
come. Let me see.
Hi, Elliot.
Elliot's so
Yeah.
cute.
Hi.
Oh.
So there's Elliot. Go, Elliot. Say hello to people.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay,
Elliot.
we already have the best moment of the festival.
he was here asking for me to pick him up, so I couldn't resist.
Just Neil. Jim is married to Mary, that she also writes, and Elliot was born in the day of the writer. So this poor guy.
Yeah, he's in for the life sentence.
Yeah. So let's check the questions.
He got
here.
scared by you guys.
No,
sorry.
writer, no.
I'm sorry.
It
So let's see. You have a couple of questions. Let me see if some of them were already talked. Okay. So one from Edgar Refinetti is how it's for you, Neil, how it works. Actually we already talked about that, but it's cool to see it like putting in an actual example. How do you choose stories that will be published that are still in languages that you don't speak? I guess you don't, right?
Like I said, we have 2 projects that are funded for translation, or we had to. And anytime we try and write a grant proposal, the model we tend to follow is that we build a team of experts in that country who will recommend maybe 10 stories. And they'll do it by, they won't translate the story. They'll give me a summary. They'll give me some, information about, where the story has been published, etc. And we'll go back and forth, and usually these are people that are familiar with my magazine, and that there's a lot of trust that ends up going into this. And then as you move on, as you make selections, I can say, well, this story had these elements. Are there other stories that incorporate some of that or some of this, and build upon that success so that we can start to expand outwards over time? For example, with the Chinese project we've been doing for over 5 years now, it's to the point where I recognize authors' names, and I'll say, oh, that sounds like an amazing concept normally, but that person doing it, I need to see that story. So you can build some of that, and then as you build that up, some of the authors start saying, you need to be reading this person. So it just starts to grow outwards, and that's what really needs to be happening more often. That's the model we follow when we find a grant or a sponsor to do the translations.
Great. It's kind of a scout process that we have here. We have scouts that go abroad, and okay, let's see what's happening here.
We just do it all digitally.
yeah. And actually, at the moment, everybody's doing that digitally, so we don't know when it's going to.
Yeah, so it's been business as usual for us, no change. All these other people are adapting, but we're like, hey, this is fine.
My idea is now you're catching up with us. That's the sense.
Now you understand.
Now you understand the power of proper clothing and proper internet in the home office.
I have been practicing social distance since I was about 5. So it's like,
I think there's a good portion of the science fiction community was like, what?
Yeah, what next?
Wait, I have to stay home? Oh, no.
I say that SFF writers are like the joke and Doctor Who of the Hermits United. We meet once a year to talk about caves, but all the time we are introverts, and that's okay. If you're happy and you know it, stick away. Thanks.
Let's see the other question. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that, but I think it's interesting thing, and I also have a personal story about that, is that Laís Helena is asking if somebody that's not a native speaker, native English speaker, this person, they probably will have some problems, in the text, that some things that sound strange, that are not properly errors, but things that sound strange. And how do you deal with that? And if you like, I don't know, I don't think it's a matter of just classifying the story, but maybe we want to know how do you especially deal with that?
I tell people that there's actually two groups that I make that I make exceptions for: young writers and non-native speakers, because there's going to be some issues where the language just isn't what I would be expecting, but the story itself comes through and is really good, and I still want it. So I'm going to go out of my way to spend more time and work with those groups, because I think, there's no reason I should be saying no to them just because, their English isn't their first language, and sometimes it's a little awkward, so I can circle certain things and go, what did you mean here? See if I can get some, sometimes it helps if there's a third party involved to have a second opinion. So I know in some cases where I've asked somebody who I know that's a translator to take a look and see, is this really what they meant to say here, or is there some other way of that word could be interpreted or whatever? So it's a matter of being flexible in those cases, and being willing to put in a little more work than you might normally.
Okay, I'm laughing because in the chat. Go ahead.
I was talking about the chat. I saw something here. On the I forgot.
On the scrolling.
Yes, the little scrolly thing, and someone talking about creating readers, forming readers, because people, when they get to Clarkesworld and others, they are already readers. They already read. But we need to create new readers. And sometimes I see a fight, especially here in Brazil. It's like old people, they don't like the new people coming up, and new people coming up, they're like, oh, those old farts, and so we have these things, and we don't have much work trying to create new readers who will eventually read the magazines and write for it, write short stories, and consume it. We are preaching to our little choir. And this is something that I ask myself, how will we work it onwards now?
Oh dear.
Yeah, no, it's a big problem. You're exactly right. I mean, we see the same thing here, and I mentioned before that there's a lot of short fiction magazines here. So the actual rate. So we have a lot of readers. We say we have about 50,000, but only less than 10% of them are actually going to support the magazine financially. So it's not just readers that you need, is paying readers to keep the markets open. And if you have that ratio of 1 to 10 roughly, or worse, you're like, okay, well, now how do I grow that many readers? It just got 10 times worse. So there's a lot of this, trying to do more outreach. I think one of the things that shifting the mindset of saying I have to please a specific American audience, and saying instead I'm aiming at a world audience, that's actually a much better target, because there's a lot more people there. And marketing wise, getting the word out is always going to be tough no matter what. So, it's important to keep on top of what's going on and be engaged in the different communities. One of the founding principles of the magazine is actually go where the readers are. which is why we do a podcast, which is why we started doing ebooks when they first came out, which is, if stone tablets came back into fashion, we would probably find a way to mass produce them. So it's, you can't just wait for everybody to come to you. And I think that's what a lot of people typically do, is like, oh, readers are just going to find me. No, they're not.
It's build and they will come, not the other way around.
Yes,
yeah. So I just want to make a comment. I want to thank all the people who support my magazine, Mafagafo. We are doing great, and even now that we are going through really tough times here, they are like supporting the magazine, and I just wanted to thank you all. And I was laughing because people in the chat are saying, "Hey, New Clarke just say that we can send a lot of stories with broken English. Let's go." I'm kidding.
Wonderful.
So just prepare. And actually,
and they should be sending you stories too. So let's get a flood of stories at her market, okay?
Exactly.
No, just wait. We are with 300 stories to read right now. So we are good right now.
300.
That's it.
300.
300. Yeah, that's it. And you think, oh my God, mine. I have only 1,000 left.
I wish.
New Clarke receives like 1,000.
1,200 last month.
500. Yeah. Oh, okay. I just want to say another comment that's connecting to the last panel. I need to say that just be prepared, Neil, because they will be sending a lot of stories with the concept of gambiarra. Did you heard about that?
No. Please.
Gambiarra is it's
the most Brazilian thing ever.
It's the most Brazilian thing ever. It's just when we don't have the tools to make something, we just go and I don't know. We create some way to do the thing,
It's so we make
it's like MacGyvering.
It's exactly.
Yeah, it's MacGyvering.
Gambiarra is the art of MacGyvering to the upper 10th level.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is
we perfected MacGyver.
We perfected MacGyver because what happens is when you don't have the tools, or you don't have the piece, or you don't have anything, you have the money, you have to make do.
Yeah.
So
and
that's the Gambiarra style.
Before working with translation, I was in another life. I was food engineer, and I did some research in the university when I was studying. And our lab was the most Gambiarra place in the world.
Yeah.
All the and it was like great. And all the researchers said, "How did you manage to do that?"
Yeah.
You want me to explain to you how I did it?
I wrote a scientific sci-fi story with a time machine, which is Gambiarra head to toe. So it's the most Brazilian time machine you're ever going to see. It's got everything is tied up with string and super glue.
Yeah, I used to work in education. Education in technology. So I understand that spirit and I really love it. So
I have experience from two sides and I suffer on both. My graduation is English literature, and so I had to survive through Gambiarra during college. And then I said, oh, my life's not bad enough. Let me go back to college for fashion. And there, when you're working with fashion, everything is Gambiarra, because you don't have time, you don't have models, you don't have things, and you have to create the croquis and the clothes and everything on the last minute. Because
just tape everything together, pin everything together.
Yes, that's what you do. You put tape. You put tape on the model so that the dress will not fall. So basically, that's how writing in Brazil is. You don't have much money. You don't have much access. Some people don't have, for example, we are really privileged people. We talk in English, we're discussing with people from other parts of the world. And some people don't have this opportunity. Some people don't have the opportunity to have contacts around the publishing world. Some people don't have the chance to find better readers and to find people
Translators,
who will
editors.
edit, yes, who will edit them and tell them this is the way you should follow, improve this, cut that. Like I said, the Max Perkins. We don't have a Max Perkins here in Brazil. We don't have someone to get the little author and say, "Come here, creature. You will do this." We have Gambiarra.
Yeah, there.
Yeah.
We don't do that there.
Yeah, I just want
to
to talk about Thiago Lee, who is the tech guy doing everything works here.
Three cheers for Thiago.
He has a lot of gambiarras there.
Yeah.
But I just want to point, when you talk about writing, Thiago works with IT. He works in a company, and he used to work in a place very far from his home. And he, I don't know, got like 1.5 hours to get there and then 1.5 hours to come back. And he got when we had a government, somewhere he got some money to publish his book, and he had a deadline to write it, but he was working and he hadn't time, so he wrote his whole book in a little notepad in the bus. Only he was like very early in the morning, so it was dark. He would like turn on the lights and write it in the bus, and then back home just type it. So this is kind of
that's what I used to do. For my first 2 books were written like that, to not commute to and fro.
A good chunk of the history of Clarkesworld is written it worked on at lunch breaks and between after the kids went to bed, and it's like
exactly.
And that's the spirit. We'll make do. We'll write when available, when the kids are asleep, before everyone else. We write on the bus. In my case, we write at the newsroom kitchen, away from everyone. And
some call it a madness. Some call it a madness. But it's actually a love.
We have
a labor of love.
It's a labor of love, and that's why we do it. Otherwise, because we don't get paid.
Oh God.
Yeah, exactly.
The first time I got money writing, it was when, like, in 10 years of writing, when I got paid by Penguin. When Penguin bought me, and I was like, "This is money! Oh my God, I had never seen this before."
Oh my God!
And then
my first pro contract was with Transluna Travelers. Jesus, I forgot the name. I was Amy Origins magazine this year, and when I got the money, I thought it was a mistake. I saw it in the bank account, like, what is this here? Oh yeah, the Traveler paid me. Transluna Travelers Lounge. Remember the name of the magazine? Sorry, Amy. And it was like, they paid me. They actually paid me.
Yes,
they should be.
Yes, they should be. Actually, when, as I say to you, we have this crowdfunding. I didn't say that. We had this crowdfunding that people are paying for to support my magazine, and we are kind of paying everyone a percentage, I don't know how to say that, of the total amount. And we have this flash fiction publication. There's a lot of people, so they had like a small amount of I'm talking about like, I don't know, $3, $4, but I wanted to pay them, so I made a contract and I sent to them, "Please just fill that and we will be paying." And people were like really, really touched. They say, "Oh my God, I'm not." I say, "Okay, don't be very excited, because it's like
it's money. It's
10 reais. It's like you can pay, I don't know, a coffee and a bread in the paddock."
One of the things about making a professional market is that we have to teach everyone that the money goes in the direction of the writer and not the other way around.
Yeah,
which is the scenario.
A lot of vanity presses here.
Yeah, vanity press is pretty much a Brazilian disease. So one of the things about a healthy market that we still have to deal with is the money goes towards the writer. Even if it's 10 reais, it's cool. It's money. It's not monopoly money. It's actually real money. So
yeah,
it works.
I would say that, but I saw now they commented in the chat, so I will say that is that we recently had the hashtag publishing paid me, right? Because Twitter, because they wanted to show the differences between people of color being paid for books and white people being paid for books. And we are, I don't know, we got like depressed, because we're like, oh my God. We'll
they are actually paying the writers. They are paying advances.
Yes, and like Jim is what we call a professional writer, right? He has his book published in a really big publishing house, and he's being published in other countries. And I'm sure that if he was published only in Brazil, he wouldn't be able to work to live on writing. I know that this is something in the Anglophone market too. I've been talking with people that they have their day jobs and they write while they have their day jobs, but the professional writers who are publishing in big publishing houses, they probably have can work with writing, and we can, like, the biggest we can reach is like me. You can write translating. That's something that I love to do. That's something that I'm in contact with books all the time, with the market all the time. But this is crazy. But okay, let's finish. We need to finish this in a good mood.
One last question. One last question for Neil.
Bring on.
Go on.
You work on a digital platform, and that's how you get access to everybody in the world. And how do you see like the future of the Codex itself? Like, will we still have the Codex? And sometimes we have stories that do not fit the digital medium, like, for example, House of Leaves by Daniel, I cannot pronounce his last name, and this book is like impossible for digital. But do you think there will come also a book that is like impossible for the Codex, that will explode it, and in which the author will, like in a short story, create something that could be only read online? This thing, what is the next step for you editors, for us writers? What is there?
That it's really hard to say. I tend to think that there's generally, if there's a will, there's a way to make it work. My background's in technology, so I would love the challenge of someone saying that can't be done. I'd be the first one in line going, I'm going to make it. But I know we do run into problems sometimes. We do audio versions of all our stories, and occasionally we're like, okay, now how are we going to do this one? A few years back, there was a story an author wrote that had clones, and all the clones had the same name, but they had different punctuation at the end of their name. Works fine in print, but in audio, that's really tough. So an exclamation point, a question mark, a dash or whatever, they all these characters, so it get very confusing. And I think our narrator did an amazing job trying to pull that one through. But we always run into something that's right at the edge, and I think we see that and we go, hey, we need to try this. Now, occasionally there's something we do say in our guidelines that we really want it to be something we can turn to audio, but I think there's only one story where we've ever seen that we couldn't, and it was because they had parallel things going on at the same time. Two columns right next to each other that had to go on, and we could have read over one another, but no one would have understood anything.
It would be some experimental art.
One story in each channel. Not that wouldn't be nice.
We've had stories that have incorporated audio as an element. We've had stuff that's had very complex formatting or whatever. I think I don't know that there's quite a limit yet on what we could do. I think there's some really interesting things happening over in the interactive fiction side, but that's been going on for years, and I don't think it's growing as fast as they'd hope. But they seem to be able to handle all of the complexities of that too.
Mm. Oh, Jim, say about him. You just type it, but go ahead and say.
And there's this very good question by Santiago. I had to find here. Neil, how do you see the acceptance of foreign stories today in Clarkesworld, like in your local market? Do people comment about a different kind of flavor? Do they ask more? That's the question.
Do they want more? I actually get when I go to conventions and stuff, or hear from some of our readers. The international stuff it comes up more often than anything else, I think, and it's usually very complimentary. They really like that what we're doing is broadening the field, introducing them to authors that they might not have heard of before. I think a lot of short fiction readers are into the idea of discovering new voices to follow, and more so than I think in the novel side of things. And I think there might also be there might be a difference in science fiction and fantasy readers as well. At least when you look at the novels, most of the science fiction, there seems to be more standalone science fiction than there is a standalone fantasy. But I think that's changing now too. We have a lot of people who won't go read short fiction because they feel that they can't spend their lives there, I guess, because there's not 10 books in this series and the story's over. I'm not going to hear any more about this. So there is some of that, but by and large, the people who really like short fiction seem to be embracing what we're doing. There are a few that are like that believe that nothing good happened since 1970. We don't listen to them,
but then we don't care.
Yeah, they don't count. It's like, well,
we don't listen to them.
Thanks.
I've been working since 2006, so.
Yes, I'm like you can keep your
yeah. We can't please everyone. You can't please everyone.
I would say about that in the beginning of a conversation, that some people want to, as you say, the comfort food, but they have lots of books comfort and food. Magazines where they can find it. So just get out of here.
Bradbury is always going to be there. Bradbury is always going to be there. Asimov is always going to be there.
Exactly. I will do a comment.
I don't like Asimov, but Bradbury, okay. But it's a bit like they're always going to be there. There's not going to be if you want to return
I've gotten criticism before. Somebody said, this story is just like Heinlein, and you wouldn't publish. It's like, yeah, but that's like 50-year-old science or more than that science fiction. It's not. If they were writing today, writing in that style, they wouldn't be getting published. If they were writing today, they wouldn't be writing in the same old style. They would have moved forward.
Well, so we hope.
I will make a comment, kind of off the topic, but I need to do that. And then I will do the last question that's mixed up. So, Neil, in the next, last weekend, we should be having Odisseia, Fantástica Literatura. That's a Brazilian event, one of the biggest that's in the south of Brazil, in Porto Alegre. And it's, Anna sent a message to you, I guess, to all the authors coming here. And the stereotype that as Brazilians, we really like to congregate and to make parties and all of that is true. So
we are noisy.
Yeah,
we are noisy.
And this event is something that we all love because it's one of the only time when you can see, as an example, Jim lives in Belo Horizonte in Minas Gerais. I never see Jim in person, like it's very one event here, one event there.
See him now either.
It's camouflage,
and people are saying in the chat that they are very happy because it's as we didn't have the Odisseia due to COVID, of course. This relampeio is helping them to cope with the grief, you know. We were like really sad, and I don't know if you are reading the news, but being a Brazilian right now is like really depressing, you know.
Yeah.
Because
being a Brazilian is mostly depressing most of the time.
No,
but these are trying times. So these are trying
right
times.
Now,
Yes,
right
I know.
We're not doing so hot either. But
well, yeah. But actually,
we're not going to play a game who has it worse.
Exactly.
No,
I know
it's not the grief Olympics. It's not the grief Olympics.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that because I know you are being part of that. So thank you for coming and helping us in this really hard moment. And the last question, so we can wrap up and finish before Lee, that's taking care of the tech part, dies out there.
Yes, have mercy on your tech people.
And the translators. And the translators too. So there's a question. I will mix up two questions. One from Paulo Vinicius dos Santos that was here all the festival, and the other, and I will mix with Vilcar Martins that also was in the chat all the time. So this is about the independent venues or ways of publishing, and I will summarize that but they want to know what do you think about, like, because Paulo said we have a lot of independent material here that it's easier to get published, of course, because you just need to, I don't know, have internet access, but sometimes the material is not the best. And some people work with magazines because they know this is a learning process. So they know their material will be, edited, will be wrote. I don't know how to say that. Copywritten, exactly. And so what do you think about that? If you think this is a good way of starting the market, like publishing a couple of indie things and then going to the short market, professional market, or I don't know about that.
Okay. Do you mean that they're they're self-publishing first, or are they?
Yeah, exactly. Self-publishing like Amazon or Wattpad or other.
Yeah. I mean, whatever works for them, whatever makes them the most comfortable, whatever they feel they're learning the most from. I think a lot of people tend to underestimate their skill, though, and aim a little bit lower than they should. I tend to recommend that people shoot up and then work down. There's no harm in sending a story to a magazine, and if they don't want it, then you can keep working on it and publish it yourself if you want. But if you publish it yourself first, you'll have no chance of selling it to a market that wants first rights, for example. So, if you work top down, you have more opportunities. But at the same time, some people aren't ready for the rejection that comes with that. So it's really about choosing the highest up you can go while still being comfortable.
Yeah, this is
accepting the rejection sucks.
Yes.
At any level, and you gotta move on.
It is part of being a writer, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
I used to have an ego, but I had it surgically removed during this process of being a writer.
My ego thinks that a matchbox is a country suit with is a mansion like Downton Abbey. That's how it works.
It's like Hamlet said that you could be king of infinite spaces in a nutshell.
Exactly.
So, and like when I started writing with screenwriting for cinema, etc., it has so much back and forth, and it's not good, and it's not good. Come back, write again. This part in this structure, and like writing a screenplay was more damaging for me because it's grueling, the process of learning structure again and being beaten and someone say not good until you get the eighth version of it. So it accept the rejection, go with it. Learn how to embrace your suffering.
Well, I used to, before embracing fiction full-time, I was a journalist.
Oh, God.
So I learned how to write very fast. You learn how to put everything in the right order, the inverted triangle. And you learn that people will never be pleased, because the moment you publish, 5 seconds later, if not earlier, someone's going to say that you got it all wrong. And you learn how to tell them, you know what, if you think I got it all wrong, next time I'll interview you and then we'll be happy. Otherwise, F off. You end up saying like, okay, I didn't like my text. No lawsuits. Next. have a list and go, oh, you didn't like it. Next. You end up, you publish it or you perish. You die in it, so might as well write. We're gonna die anyway, might as well write.
I know that I said it was the last question, but actually people are upset because they.
Go on. I'm not going anywhere. Let's.
So let's do. We have 3 more questions. Okay, let's go.
We went from 1 to 4.
Okay.
Like really quick game, so we can answer all of them. So the first one is from a publishing house called EUA. They are logged in the publishing house profile, and it's new. How do you understand how people receive the most experimental prose, the most different things, considering how the Anglophone market are connected to the rules for each gender, and I don't know. It comes to my mind that we have Sergio Mota. This is one of the names you should be keeping your eye on that. Sergio Mota. He wrote a short story called Spider. He published it in the Strange Horizons special issue, and we saw some critique in the Anglophone market, in the internet, saying that they didn't think it was fantasy. They liked the short story, but they say this is not fantasy. This is something like it's a metaphor. It's not. There's no fantastic element.
Metaphors are fantasy. Get over it.
Yeah, exactly. So
there are some. I actually have this discussion often with some of the authors we've translated. There are some reviewers here that hate translations and make no effort whatsoever to put in the time to figure out what they're missing, or to actually, sometimes it feels like they didn't even read the story. I tell them to ignore those people. The story was published by editors that knew what they were doing, a market that's got a good reputation, and unless the readers are bashing down their doors with pitchforks and torches, I said, then it's not a problem. Experimental, like I said, we're working in short fiction. We can smuggle in that experimental piece amongst a less experimental issue with 5 more traditional stories, and people will go, that was interesting. But if we did 6 stories that were all experimental, they might get upset with me. But usually when we run something that's a little more experimental, people are the majority of readers seem to appreciate the fact that we're willing to take a chance. And I think editors who aren't willing to take a chance in short fiction find their magazines getting stale, and they start losing readers over time.
Great. So now be prepared. We'll be receiving a lot of stories with gambiarra and broken English and crazy stuff. So
hey, I will even write one of those.
Well, that makes 2 of us.
Wait for me. I will write some middle grade gambiarra.
Please,
is everyone going to coordinate what day to send them on to?
You'll probably find out anyway.
I will do another question. There's 2 left, and then
Sure.
while you answer, I will just try to change my phone because I need to charge myself.
Mhm.
So this question is from Priscilla Satman, that she also is in the chat all the time. So hi, Pri. She's asking how to. I think we already talked a little bit about that, but maybe we can go further. It's like how to attract people to read things that are not in their close. We say bubble. I don't know if this is the translation.
Well, that's the $1 million question.
I changed my.
Oh yeah.
How do you
I mean,
convince
I
them?
think everybody has that problem. I think, are these people who are not reading at all? Because that changes everything. You know, if they're not reading at all and trying to get them to read in the first place, that's a bigger challenge. But if they read some things, I would say, you know, one of the things I see a lot of authors here do is they'll send stories to multiple different markets to hit the widest number of readers they can, because they know Strange Horizons has a bubble over here. You know, Clarkesworld has one here, Asimov's has one here, Lightspeed has one here, and they overlap in some places, but nobody shares all their readers with all the other magazines. So, you know, being published, you know, having stories out in different places is a good thing. If you're trying to get people some exposure, you know, trying to get them started in reading short fiction, I don't know if you have any, what kind of anthologies you have. I mean, we have a tradition of year's best anthologies here. And that tends to be what I tell people to start with, because it pulls stories from all sorts of different markets, and then they can look at the back of the book, figure out their favorites, and go, oh, 4 of those came from this anthology, and those are my 4 favorite. I'm going to get that book and read the rest of the stories in it. And that editor also has 4 other anthologies, so I'm going to check those out as well. So you can sort of feed your way around, or, you know, go by author as well. Like you read a story by one author. Unless it's their first story, there's going to be other ones out there that you can track down and find. So, you know, how you make people do that, you know, I think they have to be entertained. If somebody really likes something, then they're going to put in the effort to find more.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me well, because I just changed my microphone. Okay, so this is something that we try to do with Faísca. That's the project I say to you about the flash fictions. It's a newsletter that goes to everybody emails like every week, and there are 2 stories, and we know about a lot of people who say, oh my God, why I never read something from this person? I will look and see if she or him, they have something else. So let's go to the last question. People here are saying, hey, we didn't break the record of the last panel. That was the longest. Yeah. So we are good.
I don't know. I'm disappointed.
But unfortunately, I have to go. I have to work. My work consists on 6:30 here. I have to get Elliot, and I have to shake him while listening to emo rap. So I have to shake him listening to emo rap so that he will sleep every day.
So Jim, please go. Thank you a lot for coming.
No, I'm staying here. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. And so you need to go now, or you?
No, I can wait.
Okay, perfect.
Wrap it up.
So let's go with the last question. It's from Edgar too. And this is an interesting question. He says that probably the magazine have been receiving lots of stories about the pandemic and the COVID-19 and all of that. And if it's when this is over, what's the best way to check the magazines are interested in the subject, or if you just, I don't know, should think that that never happened, you know?
The question is more, in our perspective, is more when we can start publishing those stories without upsetting people. Now, we had a pandemic story in inventory when all this hit. We had bought it in December, and it didn't start getting bad here until a little bit later. But we've held on to that one. It's a little more serious. Now, we bought one during the pandemic, but it's more comedic. And we think we can probably get away with publishing that one sooner. So we may see, we're deciding whether or not to publish that one in July or August. But yeah, we are being flooded with pandemic stories at the moment. I would say that is the largest, the single heaviest theme we're getting at the moment. Yeah, we're, some of our team is getting tired reading pandemic stories, but it's still possible to have one that stands out from the others. I always tell people that writing a story that's sort of flooding the markets right now is a little bit of a risk, but with magazines we can buy stories and publish them 7 or 8 months later. So we can buy, 3 or 4 pandemic stories and not do a pandemic issue, but spread them out across a year and it'll be okay. Anthologies can't do that. So they have a harder time, buying stories that are similar. But I would say, it depends on how strongly you feel that story needs to be out now. Do you think the readers are ready for it? Do you think the readers need it? If you think it would be helpful to everyone to read this story and maybe it gives them some hope, then by all means send it out.
I need to say something. Yesterday I said about it, but I didn't say the name of the story. I will be publishing the first translated story in my magazine, and it's a Clarkesworld story.
Really?
I had the rights from Naomi Kreitzer, so I will be publishing So Much Cooking.
Oh wow! Yeah,
I translated it myself, and I will be publishing that exactly because. My sister is a nurse. She's not working with COVID right now. Actually, she will be starting a new job on Monday, and she'll probably be working with COVID. But there's I think it's the sister-in-law of the main character is a nurse. And I was very touched by this story, and I won't spoil you because I really want you to read the translation or the original story that's available in Clarkesworld. But the story it was really nice to me to read it. I feel very, I don't know, I feel very touched, and it's a really beautiful story. So this is crazy too, because for you that if you didn't read So Much Cooking, it's a story that's kind of Naomi, just like she wrote in 2015, I guess it was published, right?
I think so.
So 5 years ago, and it was like really impressive how she thought about how it would be a pandemic, and it was really similar to the reality. So
yeah, Naomi has a unique way. No, Naomi has a unique way of approaching situations, and that story, it's the tale of a pandemic through the eyes of a food blogger.
Yeah.
So that she does interesting things like that. With several of the stories we've published by her have X done this way. So she comes at a situation from an angle that makes it interesting, or more interesting.
Yeah. So I was not planning to make this announcement, but it just
no, mark it away. Let everybody know they should be going to read that story.
I love this crisscross of cultures when we get to know people and people get to know us. And I love because we are all this big bubble of influences from different kind of places, and when you get everything together, that's how you are born as a writer, as a reader. And this pandemic, to distract myself, I have started to write completely different things from my usual things. For example, I love my job is to write middle grade fart joke books. But right now I was writing some existential horror Lovecraftian things set in Minas Gerais, you know, which is my state most famous for.
Remember me when you send it. Remember me when you finish it.
Okay.
Remember me when you finish
I started to write this because it's funny that me as a Black writer, I am influenced by Lovecraft, and I also try to make this cannibalistic approach to take the existential horror of the thing and set it in my state, which is famous for very rococo art from previous centuries and very religious and farms mostly and things. And so I have tried this, and it's interesting how you can break when influences you have from different places, different approaches. And I love it when we have a table like this. We get to know people. We get to absorb things. I don't know if I'll publish those stories I wrote, but it's funny to have this experience.
Please do. So people are freaking out in the chat with the news. And I also need to say that my mom just appeared in the chat. So she's very Oi, mãe, obrigada por participar. Mãe e pai, meu pai também tá aí. So I think that's it. People are really just one point here. They asked me to say that people are thank you all for coming. They are really happy, and they say
for coming.
They say
thanks for having us.
They say that this conversation is something that they would expect of a conversation of as if you were all in a bar, you know, like drinking something and chatting. So they're very happy with that. And
since all I got is water, though.
Yeah,
we shall meet in the pub someday.
Yep. Water too.
I support that.
I can promise today we are right now, just to know, we are in June, and in June we have a very traditional festivities here that we call festivities of June or something like that.
June festivities.
Yeah, and we're supposed to be in the winter right now, so we do lots of mullet wine and things like that. So I can promise that I will be only on water today because I'm very tired with everything happening, but this is nice. And I think that's it. I want to know if any of you want to say some final words, and then I will make the final wrap up of the panel and the festival in general. So Anna, first.
First in English, so you can hear it. Right away, send him a lot of stuff, because the more you send it, the more you get used to the idea of being rejected and then eventually being published. Em bom português, tratem de escrever, caramba! Porque eu também quero publicar, por favor. Tratem de escrever e não tenham medo da rejeição ou da eventual edição ou da bronca, porque é disso que somos feitos. A gente vai ter que sobreviver para contar a história. Então, como dizia o Ilíada, eu acho, que um dia nós vamos olhar para trás e vamos rir de tudo isso. Vamos começar a rir agora, que é para adiantar o serviço. Escrevam.
So, Jim?
Então, first of all, people, all of you, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And especially this week, I was really quite depressed, and I was even away from the internet. And because I was in a state in which I just wanted to lay down and wait for a truck to come over, even though I live in an apartment.
Don't do that.
Yes, but it has been so good. It has energized me, and it's a lovely conversation, and I love to talk about books, and I love to talk about stories and to know people about it. And so it was great, and I thank each one of you for this, and I hope we get to see each other many other times, especially Neil I had never seen before, but I hope we get to find each other again.
We'll make a Brazilian team to go to the World Cup, and we'll chase him.
And that's it. And for the people over here, gente, muito obrigado pela paciência, pela atenção de vocês e por aguentar a gente esse tempo todo. Então, tipo, foi bem legal, assim, e eu acho que é isso. Thank you so much, my dear little creatures, and I hope we see each other.
Apparently, my mom started to interact with other people in the chat, and she already invited everybody to have cake and coffee home when we are out of.
That's not a new thing. That's not a new thing that you brought up. Your parents are heroes.
Yes, your parents are very lovely. I love to meet them every event we go because they're so cuddly. So
no, I told her we have to have a book on the adventures of her dad and the drone.
Do they have a webcam? I mean, we could bring them in.
Bring them in. Her parents are legendary. Her parents are absolutely legendary.
Yeah, they are.
And yes, taking from Jim, thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure, especially I'm a very talkative person who hasn't been talking to anyone but my husband and my kid for 90 days. I'm in social isolation. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks very much for having us, and keep on writing. And please, broken English or no English, as my teacher used to say, having an accent means that you know something that the other person doesn't. So bring the accent.
So, Neil.
Yes.
Your final word.
So this is the end of this panel, and this is the last panel of the conference.
Yay!
But this is the beginning. So this is the beginning of this conversation. This is the first time I've got to meet you people. Many of the people who are chatting, this is probably the first they've heard from me. I hope that this is not where it ends. I want this to be where it starts. So I want to see stories in my slush pile. I want to hear from you guys again. I want recommendations of authors I should be watching for. I think this has been wonderful. I hope more of these happen, and we have to do this again sometime.
Great, please. We are. Yeah, you just brace yourself, Neil. That right now you
don't know what you're waiting for. You really don't know what you're waiting for.
Great. So I will just switch to Portuguese to end the panel, and then we can chat a little bit afterwards. But I just say goodbye to people and the festival, okay? So thank you a lot, Anna, Jim, Neil. It was really, really nice. I'm very happy, and also I'm feeling very soothed by this conversation. So, bom, gente, este é o final dessa mesa e é o final do Relampeio também. Como a Fer disse, a ideia desse festival era ser uma coisa que trouxesse luz. O nome, ele não é à toa, sabe? A Fer escreveu um texto maravilhoso falando como a gente pensou nesse nome como algo que fosse para trazer luz e também energia, né? Tipo, a gente quer que isso sirva de combustível para novas coisas nesse momento tão difícil, que é tão difícil achar força e enfim, vontade de fazer as coisas, quanto mais de fazer arte nesse país, escrever nesse país de literatura. Então é isso. Eu quero de novo pedir para vocês, se vocês puderem, se vocês gostaram, se vocês de alguma maneira sentem que vocês devem reconhecer o nosso trabalho e puderem, façam uma doação para um dos 3 projetos. Os 3 projetos são projetos independentes, a gente não tem nenhuma relação com eles, são projetos que a Lígia, que está de aniversário hoje, parabéns, Lígia. Ela procurou esses 3 projetos, que são projetos que já estão rolando. Então, se vocês puderem, entrem lá no nosso site, tem todas as informações para doar. E eu acho que é isso. Assim, é muito... É aquele, que nem eu falei, é o meme do Chico Buarque, triste, feliz aqui. A gente está muito feliz por todas as conversas que rolaram. Lembrando que elas vão ficar disponíveis. Então, se vocês curtiram, também pode mandar para a galera, que depois vai estar legendado. E é isso. A qualquer momento, o nosso Tech Guy aqui vai nos desconectar. Então, tchau, gente. Até o próximo relampeio.
Farewell,
tchau,
people. Auf Wiedersehen.